Welcome to the PROCON podcast, hosted by Paul Vogels, with expert guest interviews, case study reviews, and insightful discussion topics. The PROCON podcast leads the project controls conversation.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a new episode of the PROCON podcast. Today we are launching a new series, and as you all know or might remember, we did some software specials, we did some use cases, and we're still looking for new use cases. So please, if you want to tell me something about your project or around your use case, please reach out to us. And the final track is education. We did some educational tracks, and the new podcast we are launching, or the new theme we're launching, is around integral project management systems. And there is a big blog series on the internet site, blog.primaned.com, around an integral planning management system, around an integral project management system called OPC, Oracle Primavera Cloud. And in this series, we're going to talk you through some of these blogs with some additional information and some additional assets and content around this topic. And we're going to do it a little bit backwards or more randomly than in the blog series. And today, we're going to start on how OPC can help you to reduce delays and scope creeps and financial penalties and risks, etc. And in the next series, we're going to talk about the timing, how it can reduce manual project involvement and save you some time in order to deliver more success on the project, in order to deliver more project insight, and how you can reduce these constraints around this. And finally, we're also going to talk about the planning principles, the planning optimization, all these kinds of topics we're going to answer in the next couple of podcasts. It's an audio only, so you don't need to check the camera. I'm just here by myself in the PROCON podcast studio. It's an audio only, but in the content you can see more information. So today we're going to talk about the blog which is called How OPC Helps You Reduce Project Delays, Scope Creep and Financial Penalty Claims. And first of all, I want to emphasize it's not about the tool. It's about the people. It's about the process. And of course, the tool makes a very good facilitating function in this triangle. And I always like to recall the metaphor, if you put me in a Formula One car, which is, I think, the fastest car on the world, no matter which brand it is, I am not going to be the world champion. It's about Max Verstappen in this case, about the people. It's about the process, the team, the training he has been doing for the last 15 or 20 years. And of course, the tool facilitates Max in his world championship. But it's not that if you buy the best planning management system or the best risk management system, that it all magically will disappear. If we're talking about project planning and scheduling, it's not a one-time thing. That's the opening of the blog series. It's a rhythm. It's a methodology you need to emphasize. You need to live in your project up to. The schedule, for example, that's a product we say where all knowledge areas come together. It's constantly in motion. Your time will delay. Your time will be running when you face the project. So there will also be a change constantly in your project, no matter if it's scope. When you open up a valve, you see the corrosion in your kettle, for example, or you see the corrosion in your machine. That's a scope change. When you want to build something along the process, you have some new insights. You make a request for change, so the scope will change, and this, of course, will affect some unforeseen, or maybe, in the Netherlands we have a theme called the foreseen unforeseen. I expect something new, but I don't know what it's gonna be. Those activity will generate new scope, will generate additional resource demands, will generate some new risks, etc., which will end up in something which will change the project. And the role of this project manager is to get all those frogs in the wheelbarrow while you're moving along with this wheelbarrow. And therefore, the project management needs to control and needs to have some insights in what is going to happen. If you look at the project planning and the project scheduling, risk management, they are very interlinked, or there's a very strong relation. If you need to do more work in the same time frame, because it's mandatory to finish before 31st of December, or it's preferable that you finish before the 1st of July, for example, with the road, before all the traffic to the holiday season starts, and that kind of constraints. If you do more work within the same time frame, you need more resources. If you have more resources, your cost will be affected. If a risk occurs, or if there's a new risk, for example, with a change in the scope, you need to have countermeasures, you need to make actions, and you have the need for a new plan at the end. The role of the planning engineer, of the scheduling engineer, is to report on the status as is, and to make some scenarios. How are we going to change? How are we going to make the rest of the project? And that's why you need to have not a one-time scheduling exercise, but it needs to be a role within your project management team, within the PMO, within the planning department, for example, that every week or every 2 weeks, you look at the schedule, you import all the new progress, you make some new activities, you make some new scope, work packages, etc. And the planning engineer, the scheduling engineer, will make new scenarios for the project manager to steer his project, because he needs to hire more people to be in time. He needs to spend a little bit more money on risk. He needs to spend a little more money on mitigations. That kind of scenarios, that kind of countermeasures is something the project manager needs to decide, because he's the budget owner. He's talking to his stakeholders, to the environment, to the board level, for example. He needs to make the decision, and the planning engineer, the document manager, and the cost manager, etc., will give him the best set of information with some predictions or some scenarios to take actions on. If we look at all the aspects of planning, for example, we like to talk about knowledge areas, and we'll talk about it a little bit further on in this podcast. But the knowledge areas are mainly defined by PMI, Project Management Institute, and they go back to the basics: time, scope, and costs. But within this iron triangle or triple constraint, there is a very strong trend at the moment, last couple of years going, but it's getting stronger and stronger. For example, especially with use cases like the Evergreen got stuck in the channel. COVID prevents people to travel easier. COVID takes a big chunk out of your staff at the moment. Well, these kind of things make, for example, the resources, and if we're talking about resources, we're talking about people, labor forces, we're talking about material, which can be concrete, or it can be wood, or it can be scaffolding, etc. And we're talking about machines, a crane, a dozer, a shovel, whatever you want to plan on, and probably these are the critical machines. So it's not your day-to-day shovel, which you can rent or buy at the hardware shop, but it's this specialized machine. It's the big machine. It's the clunky machine, etc. So that's something we are talking about when we're talking about resources. And the fifth element we try to involve into the knowledge areas are risks. Risk can be, of course, on a negative downside, when something happens and you are getting a delay, uncertainties. We don't know how fast the concrete will dry, how long it takes for an activity. But of course, it can also be opportunities. We're always talking about claims and we're talking about penalties, etc. But there's also an opportunity downside to it. That's something we're seeing as well in the project management world, that from a risk perspective, there's also the positive risks, which we try to call an opportunity. If we look further, of course, it's the tool is one part of the equation, Oracle Primavera Cloud or Primavera P6, or there are some different solutions, scheduling solutions like Microsoft and Deltek, etc. in the world, construction management solutions like PMWeb or Hexagon, etc. But it's not the biggest differentiator if a project succeeds or not. It's the process, it's the integrality, if that's an English word, the integrality into the people, processes, and tools, but also within the process. For example, if you look at all the knowledge areas. One thing for sure, a project will change in time, in scope, whatever. And so that's we can stick our head into the sand or try to hide from something, but at the end it will be there. It will rain, no matter if we write it down or not. It will rain. We can calculate the probability, but at the end, it will rain. But what an integral planning management solution will differentiate from other specialized scheduling solutions is this integrality. So in OPC, risks, scheduling, activities, costs, processes are all integrated. The minute I change an activity in the OPC schedule, then I can make a new calculation based on that schedule without importing, exporting to other systems, looking at synchronization, which might be sometimes very good, but sometimes if you're looking at the core knowledge areas, we want to have a specialized tool. We like to call it T-shaped professionals, T-shaped tools, very broad. If you imagine a capital T, very broad in the top, so the all 5 knowledge areas, and very specialized, very deep in some of them. And for example, scheduling and risk is one of the specializations within the Oracle suite. If you're talking about the Primavera suite, it's especially designed for construction and engineering, corporate real estate, that kind of stuff. Also in this blog, there's a very nice article, and I try to have another example. I watched at a conference about it's the SAID business school, and they reported on cost overruns, scheduling overruns in different types of projects. So you look at a very traditional energy project, the average cost overrun is more than 30%. 6 out of 10 projects will overrun. 38% will overrun in the scheduling, for example. One other it's a very funny story, of course. The schedule overrun in an Olympics project from the last decades they investigated is 0.0%. In all the Olympics in the last years, none of them got a schedule overrun. You can imagine, you have never seen on television that the Olympic flame will be delayed by one day because the construction wasn't finished, for example. But if you look, for example, on the cost overrun, it's 156%, which is the most of all the 7 industries they have looked into. This means you can buy time. That's a very short sighted, for example. But if you hire much more resources, of course the efficiency will go down. But at the end, if you hire enough resources, you will make it in time. And also in the Netherlands, we had this. We had one of these examples. The building of the European Medicine Agency was a tender which has been asked on 99% probability in the tendering phase on time, and they anticipated that the cost will be more higher percentage-wise, relatively, than on a traditional building block, on a traditional office block. So hereby you see that the relation might be even exponential between time and cost, because a dam, for example, or a rail or something else, is less cost overrun than than the Olympics, but the percentage of the schedule overrun was much higher. 8 out of 10 roads were over time, were over cost. 6 out of 10 energy projects were over costly. Only 38% was the schedule overrun. So with this triple constraint, you can play. Let me try to put it that way. You can play with, okay, if we want to be finished earlier, then we need to spend more money. And that's something which comes into another topic, that the claim culture, which is maybe in the US a little bit stronger than in the European continent right now, but you see that coming into these projects. So if you don't want to be late and get penalized by that, you might want to spend a little bit more money, but less money than the penalty, on additional resources or backup cranes or stronger cranes or whatever, to make up a little bit of the time you have been delaying. And then on a financial part, have a positive business case. So if the penalty is, let's say, 100,000 euros, which is not uncommon in an infrastructure project, and you need to spend 30,000 more on labor cost to actually finish in time, well, every CFO will decide for the 30,000 euros, because in total you will save or not spend 70,000 euros. So that's something where the relationship in this iron triangle, or the PM star, which we have seen, is becoming more and more relevant. But also, for example, on the risk part, we see more and more countermeasurements to avoid risks, to make advantage of the opportunity. So spending 20,000 euros on a tent to work in a dry condition might pay off against the delay you will get if it's raining cats and dogs and you can't work, and will be penalized on the finishing date. So that's something which we need to have in our mindset, that project management is changing from just a schedule to the triangle to the PM star, which contains 5 knowledge areas, for example, and be more integral, because we need to work together. If you look in a scheduling department, a scheduler doesn't get the information carried to him. He needs to be proactive. He needs to go out to the cost engineer. He needs to go out to the document manager, etc. Gather information, ask the why question to get the real answer. That's something which is more in these systems. And one other example in this is, for example, lean scheduling, where the real core scheduler, the scheduling engineer, makes the schedule on a level 3, for example, which contains activities, but doesn't do all the subtasks. But with lean we mean sticky notes, which is more the agile way of planning, will be delegated to the guys and girls who actually need to do review, a draft review, a proposal, and an attachment, drawing up a 3D model, etc. More on a task level. And if you do that in one solution, one integral solution, the scheduler sees the change, sees the impact of these sticky notes, for example, and can make the integration between very granular detailed tasks to a more high-level schedule, to a more overall portfolio schedule, report to the project manager, portfolio manager, etc., and then have a clearer insight. Because besides the correlation between one project, so if I don't have the foundation ready in time, I can't start putting up the wall. But also, if one project finishes late and we need a crane, for example, let's get that back in project number A, and if that's finished, you can go to project number B. If project A is late, project B will start late, etc. And then you have this kind of domino effect, and that's impacting the business. So what you see with these roles, like a scheduling engineer, that it's more integrated into the organization, into the businesses, because he needs to talk to purchasing to get all these parts in time. He needs to talk to logistics to get all the machines out of time, to HR, how many people do we need to hire, where are we going to get them from, to the financial department, how much money can we make a reservation for a risk contingency, that kind of things. So the scheduling engineer role is changing also very important, and therefore people, processes becomes even more important than it already was. So that's where we want to see. This claim culture, I mentioned it again, is based on financial penalties. If I start late because you did something wrong, I'm going to claim you, I'm going to sue you. So therefore also what we see, and we'll talk about this in another podcast, write down what you do. I had a colleague, and he was married to one top lawyer. Claims is not about who is right, but who did the best documentation. That was one of the lessons he told me, and that's still something which is very, very true, I think. So from start on, make this kind of culture, make this kind of process in your department, in your project. If we do something, we write it down, we schedule it. If we change something, we write down why did we change it, what did we change, and what's the outcome. So we can talk about this later, we can discuss this later. Okay, but we need to change this because X, Y, and Z, and that's something which needs to. You need to prepare it from day one, because if you are in a project which might take 6 months, 12 months, you can't go back. How was the status in February? But if you have a cloud-enabled solution like OPC, for example, you can roll back time. You can literally ask the system, how was the schedule 3 months ago? What was my risk register 4 months ago? What was the progress at March 30, 2019, for example, to build up a case, to build up the evidence for, whatever financial penalty or financial profitability you might have. Because if you open up the refinery a day earlier, the refinery will earn 500, 600,000 US dollar more in that day you opened up earlier. What we see that the contractors will be getting an incentive for that, for example. So the bonus malus, we call it in the Netherlands, is becoming more and more important in these environment. So how to reduce project delays with OPC? That's a little bit where we are talking about today. We're talking in the PROCON podcast about people, processes, and tools. So the way OPC helps you, it facilitates a place to get all these processes in place, to get all the information which is integrated in different knowledge areas. If you change the schedule, you will change the cost ledger, for example. If a risk, if you do a weather model, for example, you can see what impact it has on the time, etc. And that's what we like to call in the industry, it's the project paradox. The chance of achieving a successful delivery is the sum, or even more sometimes, the sum of all the individual elements. So being on time, being on budget, it's not evident, but you need to work on this by getting the right people in place with the right education, for example, to talk about business processes. You really need to hire an advisor on project controls, business processes, to make this documentation formats, to make the scheduling formats, to make the risk register, how do you calculate earned value management, these kind of things. If it's not already in your company, get this information as soon as possible into your company, and that's why so much organizations right now are looking into integrated planning, because it really helps you to rule this project with one user interface, with one process, without switching, importing, exporting Excel to SAP to Microsoft Project, etc. That's something which is really affecting your efficiency on this. So this one tool will promote integral process, will help you on the integral planning, will connect project to project, into portfolios, but also in project it will connect work packages to work packages, contractors to contractors, relations to relations, activities, etc. So all stakeholders can take a look at their specialty, into their subject matter experts can look into risks or in cost, etc. And the scheduling engineer or the project controls consultant, and it's becoming more a project controls exercise than it is a scheduling exercise these days, can connect those dots to a integral project management solution and even an integral insight into your project. So that's a little bit on the first part of or one of the first part in this blog series, how to reduce project delays, scope creep, penalty claims. One of the next podcasts, I'm going to talk about how to reduce the manual involvement, save time. It's going to be a little bit more on scheduling and on planning. And later on, also, we're going to do planning principles. What do you need to do first? And then optimization. How can you improve with buffer times, for example, or project capacity? Because your CEO needs to ask the question, not can we remove people from the staff by making it more efficient. He really needs to focus on, can we deliver more projects with the same crew, with the same, because then your EBIT, your profit in your organization will rise. And then we are going to conclude with how to get buy-in, to motivate it a little bit internally to all departments, but also to your C-suite, to your CEO, COO, and CFO. They need to. Your CFO is focused on having clear insight in your financial status. The board, and there is not a thing like a chief project officer as we speak right now. It's 2022. It would be really good, I think, but for now, the CEO, COO from an operational point of view, your CFO from a financial, and maybe even an IT point of view, need to look at, are we in control of our projects? If you are a contractor or a building supplier, or you make bespoke machines or engineering to order or whatever physical projects you are producing, you need to be in control, because every dollar, every euro you make it in a project. You are not a production company to try to push out as many Coke cans as you like, but you're delivering unique projects, unique buildings, unique machines, etc. And that's why you need to have a very strong project focus to deliver project insight, to deliver project efficiency, etc. And that's where we're going to talk about later on in this podcast. If you have a question on this topic or one of the other topics, please reach out to me personally. podcast@primaned.com. Please subscribe to the channels, Apple, Google, Spotify, also PROCONpodcast.com. You can subscribe to that. You will get an email. You can tune into all the other topics we have been discussing, for example, on OPC or on PMWeb, which is another integral project management solution, more on real estate management, on asset management. More than welcome to join us on this channel. Again, questions, podcast@primaned.com. If you have a really nice use case, if you are the project manager of the coolest project in the world, please reach out. I'm more than happy to have you here in the studio, online, offline, whatever is suitable for you. Thanks for tuning in right now, and see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the PROCON podcast. To listen and watch more episodes, you can subscribe and access the resources mentioned in this episode by visiting PROCONpodcast.com. We look forward to seeing you on our next episode, where we will continue to lead the project controls conversation. The PROCON podcast and the associated resources is published under copyright to Primaned. All rights reserved, no reproduction of this content is permitted.